The photograph lay in the middle of the table between us. Claire was smiling in it. The same gentle smile I had looked at every night for nearly 3 months. The same blue eyes I had trusted. The same face I had imagined seeing at Birmingham Airport when she finally came home. I knew that photograph better than I knew my own reflection. Then the detective turned over another sheet. The same woman appeared again. Different name. Different country. He placed a third page beside it. Then a fourth. Claire Morgan in Britain. Helen Fraser in Scotland. Susan Bradley in Australia. Marion Cole in Canada. 4 names. 4 lives. 1 face. I sat in a small interview room at Worcester Police Station with my daughter, Rachel, beside me. The walls were pale gray. The strip light above us gave off a faint hum. Somewhere along the corridor, a door opened and closed. I heard all of it, yet I could not seem to speak. Only 3 days earlier, Claire had sent me a message just before bedtime. "You are the person I have waited my whole life to find." I had read it more than once. At 69, after 4 years of sleeping alone, I had believed every word. I had also transferred £12,500 to an account she said belonged to a private hospital. The detective waited before asking his next question. "Mr. Whitmore, did you ever speak to Claire on a live video call?" I looked down at my hands. "We spoke on the telephone." "How often?" "Twice properly. There were other attempts. And video." The signal kept failing. Rachel shifted slightly in the chair beside me. I could feel her looking at me. Though I kept my eyes on the photograph, the internet was poor where she was staying. I said, "Her sister's flat was in Cyprus." The detective nodded without agreeing. "She sent voice notes. Every day. And photographs." "Yes. But no clear live video conversation." My throat tightened. "No." Rachel reached across the table and placed her hand near mine. I pulled my hand away. Not sharply. I was not angry with her. I simply could not bear the kindness of it. There are moments when comfort feels worse than accusation. I had spent my working life inspecting council buildings. I had judged cracked walls, unstable roofs, and unsafe foundations. People had trusted my opinion because I noticed things others missed. Yet my daughter was now sitting beside me, while a stranger explained that I might not have known the woman I had planned to love. The detective turned the pages towards me again. "Do you recognize all of these photographs?" "They're Claire. They're photographs of the same woman," he said carefully. "But we have no evidence that the woman in them is called Claire Morgan." I stared at the first image. I remembered the exact night Claire had first used the word times soulmate. We had only been talking for 14 days. I had thought it was too soon. I had nearly told her so. But the message had arrived on a cold evening when the bungalow felt particularly empty. Rachel had been busy. The television was on, though I wasn't watching it. Anne's old reading lamp still stood beside the chair opposite mine. Then Claire had written, "I feel as though I have found my soulmate." At the time, it had not felt suspicious. It had felt like hope. Now, in that police station, it looked like evidence. The detective asked another question. "Did Claire know about your savings?" I hesitated. "She knew I was comfortable." "Did she know about your late wife?" "Yes." "Your daughter?" "Yes." "Where you lived?" "Yes." My chest tightened with every answer. Claire knew Rachel worked at a law firm in Birmingham. She knew I kept Anne's gardening gloves in the shed. She knew I worried about becoming a burden. She knew I had £48,000 put aside. I looked once more at the 4 identical faces. If Claire Morgan had never existed, then who had been listening to me every night? And how much of my life had I already placed in the hands of strangers? 3 months earlier. None of this had begun with excitement. It began with the clock. Every morning, I woke at 6:40. Though I had been retired for 6 years, my body still expected an alarm. A packed lunch and a list of inspections waiting at the council office. I would lie still for a moment, listening to the bungalow settle around me. Then I would get up, put on my dressing gown, and make tea in the chipped blue mug Anne bought during a holiday in Tenby. She had laughed when the handle cracked and told me to throw it away. I never did. BBC Radio 4 played quietly while I spread marmalade on toast. The presenters spoke about politics, weather and railway delays, filling the kitchen with voices that required nothing from me. Anne used to disagree with half of them. I still glanced towards her chair whenever someone said something she would have found ridiculous. By 9, I was usually walking to the co-op. I bought a newspaper, milk, and whatever else I could think of needing. Sometimes I deliberately forgot something so I could return the following day. The cashier was a pleasant young woman called Priya. Morning. Peter. Keeping well. Can't complain. I nearly always said that. Once, when there was no queue behind me. I spent several minutes discussing the price of tomatoes. I knew perfectly well, neither of us cared very much about tomatoes. I simply wanted the conversation to last a little longer. The bungalow was always neat when I returned. That was part of the problem. Nothing moved unless I moved it. Anne's gardening gloves still hung from a nail in the shed, stiff with old soil. Her reading glasses remained in the top drawer beside the bed. I had never decided to keep them there. I had simply never found a day when moving them felt necessary. Rachel rang every Sunday. How are you doing? Dad. Fine. I would tell her about the loose fence panel, the heating bill, or Mr. Clark's new electric car across the road. Practical things were safer. I never told her that some days. After speaking to Priya at the co-op, I heard no other human voice until the radio came on the next morning. Rachel often invited me to Birmingham. Come for the weekend. We've plenty of room. I usually found an excuse. The traffic would be dreadful. I needed to sort the garden. I had a history talk at the community center. The truth was simpler. Rachel had a husband, work, friends, and a household with its own rhythm. I hated the feeling of arriving with an overnight bag and becoming one more person to feed. At the community center, I attended a monthly talk on local history. I enjoyed the talks. It was the tea afterwards I found difficult. Most people arrived in pairs. They leaned towards one another, sharing private jokes and opinions formed over years. I stood with a biscuit on a paper napkin, waiting for a natural gap in somebody else's conversation. One afternoon, I noticed a leaflet near the exit. Social afternoons for older adults. Théâtre. Games. Conversation. New friendships. Welcome. I picked it up and carried it home. Then I folded it twice and placed it in the kitchen drawer beneath takeaway menus and spare batteries. A former colleague, Alan, suggested something different when we met for lunch. You should try one of those companionship sites. I laughed. At my age. You're 69. Not dead. I'd rather keep what dignity I've got. He smiled. But his words followed me home. That evening, I reheated shepherd's pie and ate it from a tray in Anne's old armchair. The clock in the hallway seemed unusually loud. Tick, tick, tick. Eventually, I opened my laptop. I told myself I was only curious. The profile took less than 10 minutes. Retired. Widowed. Enjoys walking. History. Gardening and quiet conversation. I stared at the screen, feeling faintly ridiculous. My finger hovered over the delete button. Then, a small notification appeared. A woman named Claire had sent me a message. She did not comment on my appearance. She asked about the photograph beside Worcester Cathedral. My late husband loved old buildings. Did you work with them? That detail made me pause. I answered. We exchanged only a few lines before I closed the laptop and went to bed. As I placed Anne's glasses back inside the drawer, my phone vibrated. A second message from Claire. I hope this does not sound strange, Peter, but something about your face made me feel safe. I read it twice in the darkness. Why would a woman I had never met say exactly what a lonely man most needed to hear the following morning? Claire had already sent a message before I finished making tea. Good morning, Peter. I hope you slept well. It was a simple thing, but seeing my name on the screen changed the shape of the kitchen. I replied while Radio 4 murmured in the background. Not badly. I hope you did too. Her answer came almost at once. Better than usual. It is easier to sleep after a kind conversation. That was how it began. Not with romance. Not with promises. With ordinary messages exchanged between two people who understood quiet houses. Claire told me she was 61 and had lived in Harrogate for most of her adult life. She had worked as a teaching assistant in a primary school before retiring early. I miss the children, she wrote. Not the paperwork. I could imagine Anne saying something similar about her years in the library. Claire said her husband, Martin, had died from a stroke 5 years earlier. There had been no warning. He had gone to make coffee one morning and collapsed in the kitchen. I sat looking at that message for some time before answering. Anne's illness had been long. We had months to prepare. Though preparation was not the same as being ready. I'm sorry, I wrote. That must have been dreadful. Claire replied. People think sudden loss is easier because there is no long suffering. They do not understand that you lose the chance to say everything you meant to say. There was nothing dramatic in the sentence. That was why I trusted it. Over the next few days, our conversations grew longer. We talked about National Trust properties. Claire preferred Fountains Abbey. I told her Croom was difficult to beat on a clear autumn morning. We argued politely about Yorkshire tea. It is stronger, she insisted. That doesn't necessarily make it better. You have clearly been making it incorrectly. I laughed aloud. It startled me. The sound seemed unfamiliar inside the bungalow. We spoke about crowded garden centers on bank holidays and the absurd number of cushions people bought for outdoor chairs. We exchanged memories of seaside holidays, disappointing hotel breakfasts, and trying to cook a Sunday roast for one person. Claire understood the waste of buying vegetables in family-sized bags. She understood setting the table properly, then wondering why you had bothered. She understood the silence after dinner. She never pushed the conversation towards anything improper. Instead, she asked questions that felt gentle but went deeper than I expected. What did Anne enjoy most? Gardening, I said. She could make anything grow. What do you miss most about marriage? I nearly gave a polite answer. Companionship. Perhaps. Shared memories. Instead, I wrote the truth. Being known without having to explain myself. Claire did not reply for several minutes. Then she wrote, Yes, that is exactly it. One evening, she asked whether I still kept one side of the wardrobe empty. I looked towards the bedroom before answering. I do. So do we. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like recognition. A few days later, she sent me a photograph. She was standing beside the harbor in Whitby, wearing a blue coat. Her hair moved slightly in the wind. She looked elegant, but ordinary. There were faint lines around her eyes. I felt relieved. She did not look like a glamorous model trying to attract attention. She looked like someone I might have passed in a garden center or seen ordering tea in a cafe. I sent her a photograph Rachel had taken at Christmas. I was standing beside her tree in a shirt I disliked, holding a glass of wine. Claire responded quickly. You have kind eyes. I imagine people have always trusted you. The words pleased me more than they should have. We moved our conversations from the companionship site to WhatsApp. After that, Claire seemed to be present throughout my day. Her morning messages arrived before I woke. Her goodnight messages came just as I turned off the television. She sent voice notes, occasionally. Her voice was soft and measured, with an accent I could not quite place. She explained that she was not currently in Harrogate. Her widowed sister had undergone an operation in Cyprus, and Claire had traveled there to help with her recovery. I should be home in several weeks, she said. The explanation did not concern me. It made her seem caring, responsible, the sort of woman who would cross Europe rather than allow her sister to recover alone. After 10 days, Claire said, our connection felt unusual. On the 14th evening, her message arrived while I sat in Anne's old chair. I know this may be far too soon, but I feel as though I have found my soulmate. I read it once. Then again. The word felt excessive. We had never shared a room. never walked together, never sat through an awkward silence. Yet it had been years since anyone suggested there might still be a place for me in another person's heart. I typed slowly. I feel something too. That night, Claire asked me to promise we would always be completely honest with one another. I agreed. Then I placed my phone face down. When Rachel rang, I told myself I simply was not ready to explain. But why did promising honesty to Claire already feel like keeping something from my own daughter? After that, Claire became part of my routine so completely that I stopped noticing how much of my day now belonged to her. She remembered everything. If I mentioned a blood pressure appointment, she asked about it before Rachel did. If I complained about the ache in my left knee, a message would arrive the next morning. Is it any easier today? On the anniversary of Anne's death, Claire sent a voice note just after 7. I know today may be difficult, she said softly. You do not have to pretend with me. I listened to it 3 times. Most people avoided mentioning Anne because they feared upsetting me. Claire spoke her name without hesitation. That mattered. Later that evening, I admitted something I had never said aloud. I still feel guilty. For what? For wanting company. There was a pause before her reply. Wanting to live again does not mean you loved Anne any less. I sat alone in the kitchen, holding the phone close to my ear. Those words reached somewhere deeper than sympathy. For 4 years, I had treated loneliness almost like a duty, as though staying unhappy proved the marriage had mattered. Claire seemed to understand that without my explaining it. Soon, she began describing what life might look like when she returned. Nothing extravagant. We could walk on the Malvern Hills, she said. You would complain about the steep bits, and you would pretend not to be out of breath. She laughed. We spoke about lunch beside the River Severn, lavender in the garden, and perhaps spending Christmas somewhere quiet. Sometimes she described us simply sitting together, without needing to talk. That image affected me most. I had missed silence that felt shared, rather than empty. Without quite deciding to, I began preparing for her. I bought a new pale blue shirt from Marks & Spencer and told the assistant it was for a family occasion. I cleared a shelf in the hallway cupboard. I booked a haircut 2 weeks earlier than usual. The loose wooden gate Anne had complained about for years was finally repaired. While tightening the hinge, I imagined Claire arriving with a suitcase, smiling as she walked up the path. Rachel noticed the change during our Sunday call. You sound cheerful. Dad, I'm all right. More than all right. I hesitated. I've been speaking to someone. There was a brief silence. Then her voice warmed. Really? Her name's Claire. Rachel asked where she lived and how we had met. At first, she sounded genuinely pleased. Then came the practical questions. Have you video called? Not properly. Does she have social media? She's private. When is she coming home? Next month. Hopefully. Does anyone else know her? The pleasure I had felt began to shrink. Rachel, this isn't an investigation. I know. I'm only asking. She's been through a lot. So have you. I changed the subject. That evening, I told Claire about the conversation. She means well. Claire said, I know. Adult children can struggle when a parent begins a new life. It sounded reasonable. There was no criticism in her voice, only understanding. Then she told me about her own son, who had supposedly tried to control her money after Martin died. He said it was for my protection. She explained, but I felt as though grief had taken away my right to make decisions. I understood that feeling. Trust should be earned between 2 adults, she said, without family interfering. I agreed. A few days later, Claire sent me a photograph of a boarding pass bearing her name. Her flight was booked to Birmingham for the following month. I enlarged the image and read every detail. I'll collect you, I said. You don't have to. I want to. For the first time, meeting her became something with a date rather than a dream. We spoke briefly that night. Her voice sounded nervous. I haven't allowed myself to care for anyone since Martin. Neither have I. I'm frightened. You'll be disappointed. So are we. I suggested switching to video. The line crackled. "I can't hear you properly," she said. Then the call ended. A message arrived minutes later. "The internet here is hopeless." "I'm sorry." I wanted to believe her. The next morning, she sent a long message thanking me for making her feel like a woman again, rather than merely a widow. I printed it. For several nights, I kept it beside my bed. By then, I was no longer simply exchanging messages with someone online. I had committed myself to a future built almost entirely from words. 3 days after sending the boarding pass, Claire wrote again. This time there was no greeting, no heart, no good morning message. Only one sentence. "Peter, something has gone terribly wrong." Would the first real test bring us closer to meeting? Or had the test been waiting for me all along? Claire said her sister had developed complications after the operation. She was improving yesterday, she told me. Then her temperature went up during the night. I was standing in the kitchen with the kettle boiling behind me. "What have the doctors said?" "They're concerned about an infection." Her voice sounded controlled, but I could hear strain beneath it. "I may have to delay my flight." The disappointment arrived before I could hide it. I had already imagined waiting at Birmingham Airport. I had checked the route twice, worked out where to park, and even cleaned the passenger side of the car. Still, I told her what any decent person would have said. "Your sister comes first. I knew you'd understand." That sentence made the disappointment feel selfish. Over the following days, small details began shifting. Claire had previously said her sister lived in Limassol. Now she mentioned spending most of the day at a hospital in Paphos. "I thought you were in Limassol," I said. "We are. The specialist is based in Paphos," she answered without hesitation. I accepted it. Cyprus was not a place I knew well. Hospitals could be anywhere. People traveled for treatment all the time. Later, she sent me a photograph of a waiting room. It was spotless, with polished floors, pale chairs, and sunlight pouring through tall windows. "I've been here since 6 this morning," she wrote. I studied the picture for a moment, trying to imagine her sitting there alone. Nothing about it seemed wrong. At least, not to me. Her messages became less predictable. Some mornings there was no greeting. She would vanish for 10 or 12 hours. Then, return with a burst of affection. "I missed you terribly. You are the only thing keeping me calm. I wish I could put my head on your shoulder." The silences unsettled me. The affection that followed made me feel guilty for minding them. Claire explained that staff did not allow phones in parts of the hospital. During a brief call, I heard several male voices behind her. Someone laughed. A door slammed. "Who's there?" I asked. "Hospital porters." She sounded irritated. "I'm in a corridor." "Peter, I was only asking." "I know. I'm sorry. I haven't slept properly." I apologized, though I wasn't certain what for. When I asked about the flight, her answers became vague. The airline would change it. She was waiting for medical advice. She might need to stay another week. I offered to buy a fresh ticket myself. "No," she said quickly. "Why not? I would feel humiliated." "It isn't charity." "It would feel like it." Her refusal reassured me. Surely a woman trying to take advantage of me would have accepted at once. Instead of asking directly for help, Claire began asking questions that seemed almost casual. Did Rachel help manage my finances? Were my savings tied up in property? Had Anne and I planned carefully for retirement? She framed everything as concern. We should both remain independent, she said. I'd rage. Money can complicate relationships. I answered vaguely at first. Then, because she had shared so much with me, I told her I had enough put aside to feel secure. That Sunday, I went to Rachel's for lunch. Halfway through the meal, she asked to see Claire's profile. There isn't much to see. Show me anyway. I handed her my phone. Rachel scrolled quietly. This account is very new. She doesn't use social media much. There are only 4 photographs. Not everyone puts their life online. Rachel searched Claire's name, then the school where she said she had worked, then Harrogate notices and local records. Nothing appeared. No teaching profile. No mention of her husband. Nothing public at all. She's a private person. Rachel put the phone down carefully. Dad. This is how romance fraud often starts. Heat rose into my face. I spent 40 years judging whether buildings were safe. I am not a fool. Her expression changed. I didn't say you were. The words hung between us for the rest of lunch. That evening, I told Claire everything. She'll never accept me. She said, she's protective. She's suspicious. She worries. And do you trust her suspicions? Claire asked quietly. Or your own heart? I stared at the screen. I trust you. The answer seemed to settle something. Not in me. In him. The next morning, there was no affectionate greeting. No mention of the weather. No question about my sleep. Only a photograph of a hospital invoice stamped in red. Urgent? Had Claire's crisis finally become real? Or was I about to pay the price for proving my loyalty? I enlarged the invoice on my phone. At the top was the name of a private hospital. Beneath it were several lines of medical charges, administrative fees, and a figure circled in red. £3. Babe. I read it twice before calling Claire. She answered after several rings. I'm sorry. She said immediately. I shouldn't have sent that. What exactly has happened? My sister needs an emergency procedure. Her insurance won't cover all of it. Her voice was quiet, almost flat. I tried to pay from my British account, but the bank has frozen it because I'm abroad. How long will that take to sort out? They said perhaps 48 hours. I looked again at the figure. And the hospital won't wait. No. There was a pause. Then she added, please forget I mentioned it. You haven't asked me for anything. I was frightened. I sent the invoice without thinking. Claire. No. Peter. You were right before. Money complicates things. Her words made me feel ashamed of the suspicion I had not even voiced. I've never transferred money to someone I haven't met. I said, I understand. She sounded wounded, rather than angry. I should never have put you in this position. The call ended politely. That was almost worse. For the rest of the morning, her messages became brief. When I asked how her sister was, she replied, no change. When I said I was thinking of her, she sent only, thank you. By lunchtime, the bungalow felt as silent as it had before Claire entered my life. I pictured her sitting alone in that polished hospital corridor, frightened and embarrassed because she had trusted me. At 2:30, I rang my bank. The advisor asked for the recipient's name and account details. What is your relationship to the person receiving the money? A family friend. Have you met them in person? I hesitated. That isn't relevant. I'm required to ask. Mr. Whitmore. His tone was polite, but I felt as though I were being examined. I gave the details and waited. The transfer did not go through. A fraud warning appeared on the screen, and the bank placed the payment under review. Claire messaged less than 10 minutes later. They say they may give the theater slot to another patient. I rang the bank again. A different advisor repeated the same questions. Do you understand that this payment may not be recoverable? Yes. Have you independently verified the hospital invoice? I know who I'm dealing with. Even as I said it, my stomach tightened. The advisor asked me to wait while the payment was reviewed. Then Claire sent a voice note. At first, there was only breathing. When she spoke, her voice trembled. I'm sorry. Peter. I know you've already done so much just by being there for me. I can't bear the thought that she might suffer because I couldn't help her. She began crying. Not loudly, just enough for me to imagine her trying not to. I contacted the bank once more. This time, I was firmer. It is my money. I said, I understand the risk, and I want the transfer made. Several hours later, the £3, 800, left my account. Claire's affection returned almost immediately. My good man. You have saved us. This proves we are already a family. I read those messages with relief. The distance between us disappeared. For 2 days. Everything seemed settled. Then she called again. The money is trapped in the hospital system. She said, they won't discharge my sister until the final balance is paid. How much? She hesitated. £8,700. I stood very still. Claire. That's a great deal of money. I know. I've already sent nearly 4,000. I will repay every penny. She said she would sell jewelry as soon as she returned to Britain. A photograph arrived while we spoke. A diamond ring lay inside a velvet box. It was my mother's. She said, I never imagined I'd part with it. I wanted to believe that meant sacrifice on her side as well as mine. Then she said something else. Please don't mention this to Rachel. She'll misunderstand the emergency. And I couldn't bear another argument between you. I knew I should have refused. Instead, I said, I won't tell Hare. The second transfer took most of the following day. When it finally went through, I closed the banking app and felt physically sick. I made tea, but could not drink it. I checked WhatsApp every few minutes. Claire thanked me once. Then she disappeared. An hour passed. Then 6. Then the whole night. By the following afternoon, I had convinced myself she was exhausted or sitting beside her sister's bed. When her message finally arrived, I opened it so quickly I nearly dropped the phone. She survived. Peter. I covered my face and cried with relief. Then another message appeared beneath it. There is another complication. Darling. Claire said customs officials were holding documents she needed to return to Britain, and another payment might be required. I looked towards the bank statement on the kitchen table. How much would I sacrifice before admitting that love should never have to be purchased? Rachel came round the following afternoon because I had failed to answer 3 of her calls. I heard her key in the front door while I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at WhatsApp. Dad. In here. She appeared in the doorway carrying a small bag from the co-op. Her expression changed when she saw me. You look exhausted. I didn't sleep well. Is it Claire? Her sister's still unwell. Rachel placed the bag on the worktop. I turned my phone face down. But not before she noticed. You've been checking that every few seconds. I'm waiting for news. She began unpacking milk and bread. I reached for the newspaper to clear some space, forgetting that my latest bank statement was underneath it. Rachel saw the figures before I could move it. Her hand stopped. Dad. What are these transfers? I pulled the paper towards me. That's private. £3,800. Then £8,700. I know what I sent. To whom? I stood up. You had no right to look. It was lying on the table. That doesn't make it your business. Rachel did not raise her voice. That somehow made my anger feel louder. I'm frightened. She said. That's all. There's nothing to be frightened of. She took out her phone. I searched the payment reference. I stared at her. The account belongs to a small import company in London, not a hospital in Cyprus. There will be an explanation. What explanation? I don't know yet. Then ask Claire to video call now. My chest tightened. She's under enormous pressure. So are you? She doesn't need to be interrogated by my daughter. Rachel stepped closer. I'm not trying to humiliate her. I need to see that she exists. I sent Claire a message. Rachel is here. She wants a live video call. The reply came almost immediately. After everything I am facing, she still treats me like a criminal. Then another. This is exactly what I feared. She wants to control you. I showed Rachel. Her face fell. She's separating you from me. No. You're doing that yourself. Dad. Listen to what you're saying. I've listened to enough. The words left my mouth before I had properly chosen them. I think you should go. Rachel stood very still. For a second, she looked younger, like the girl who used to wait by the window when I was late home from work. All right, she said quietly. At the door. She turned back. I would rather have you hate me for a week than lose everything because I was too polite to interfere. After she left, I expected Claire to comfort me. Instead, she asked whether Rachel could access my accounts. That question stayed with me. Meanwhile, Rachel began looking into everything I had refused to examine. Through contacts at the law firm where she worked, she found only public records. But they were enough. The company receiving my money had been incorporated recently. Its registered office was a mailbox address. Its director had connections to several dissolved businesses. Similar account details appeared in online fraud warnings. Then Rachel searched Claire's photographs. The face belonged to Dr. Miriam Holt, a Canadian physiotherapist. Rachel contacted her through a professional website. Miriam replied the next day. She had never heard of Claire Morgan. She had never spoken to me. Several other men had contacted her before, after being deceived with the same stolen photographs. Rachel returned carrying printed pages. I refused to take them. Photographs can be copied by anyone, I said, including people trying to discredit Claire. Why would anyone do that? I don't know. Dad, please. She placed the photograph of Miriam beside the hospital invoice. I looked away. Facts should have been enough. They were not. To accept them, I would have had to lose Claire, our future, and the version of myself who had believed he was loved again. Rachel seemed to understand that. She stopped explaining and asked only one question. When Claire needed money, she could reach you instantly. When you needed proof, why did she disappear? I had no answer. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. Claire had sent a message. I have been arrested at the airport because of the unpaid medical debt. Another appeared beneath it. They need 19 pounds. 000. Immediately. Peter, please. You are the only person I have. Rachel read it over my shoulder. She placed her own phone beside mine on the table. We can call the police together, she said. Or you can send it and never know whether you ignored the last chance to save yourself. On one screen was my daughter, who had loved me all her life. On the other was the woman who had called me her soulmate after 14 days. Which one was I prepared to trust? I did not send the 19,000 pounds. But I could not bring myself to call the police either. For several minutes, I sat between the two phones while Rachel watched me without speaking. Then I picked up mine and typed, I need a live video call. Claire. Now. Her reply came almost at once. After everything we have shared. You still need proof. I read the message twice. Yes. I wrote. Just one clear call. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then returned. Love should not require evidence. Something about that sentence made me feel cold. Anne and I had trusted each other for 38 years. But neither of us had ever used trust as a weapon. We asked questions. We disagreed. We showed one another bills, letters, and awkward truths. Love had never meant proving loyalty by ignoring fear. Claire sent another message. Your daughter has poisoned you against me. Then another. If you abandon me now, I do not know what I might do to myself. I stared at the words. Rachel reached for my phone, but stopped before touching it. That isn't love, Dad. This time, I did not argue. I imagined Claire alone somewhere, frightened and desperate. Then I imagined someone typing those words calmly, waiting to see whether fear would make me open my banking app again. I placed the phone on the table. Make the call, I said. Rachel contacted Action Fraud, while I rang the bank's fraud department. My voice shook when I explained the transfers. The advisor asked whether there was another payment pending. Yes. Do not authorize it. I won't. The bank froze the attempted transfer and began tracing the earlier payments. Within an hour, a local police officer was sitting in my bungalow. He was younger than Rachel and spoke to me with such gentleness that I found it almost unbearable. I should have known, I said. These criminals target careful people. He replied. They spend time learning what matters to them. I worked as a building inspector. That doesn't make you immune to loneliness. I looked down. He had not meant it cruelly. That made the truth harder to avoid. Rachel opened her laptop and showed me the reverse image search. The woman in the blue coat appeared across several websites. Then Rachel played an interview with Dr. Miriam Holt, the Canadian physiotherapist whose photographs had been stolen. It was Claire's face, but the voice was entirely different. Miriam spoke quickly, with a Canadian accent, about rehabilitation after spinal injuries. I watched her smile at the interviewer, the same smile I had looked at before going to sleep, yet there was no recognition in it. No private history, no promise, only a stranger who did not know I existed. Something inside me gave way. Over the following days, the police examined Claire's messages and voice notes. They noticed things I had missed. Some messages used perfectly natural British expressions. Others contained awkward phrases Claire would never normally use. The spelling changed. The punctuation changed. The times changed. One officer explained that the account may not have been operated by one person. There were probably several people. He said, taking shifts. I felt sick. I had imagined Claire beside her sister's hospital bed, writing to me in quiet moments. Instead, my conversations may have been passed from one stranger to another. The story of Anne's death, Rachel's marriage, my savings, my fear of becoming a burden. All of it may have been copied into notes, so the next person knew what to say. Claire had not remembered me. They had kept records. The account receiving my money was linked to a man named Daniel Price, 34, from Luton. He claimed he had only allowed someone else to use his account for a commission, but records showed other older victims had sent money through connected accounts. One widower in Devon had lost the proceeds from selling his home. I had thought Claire chose me because something rare had passed between us. The truth was simpler. I had been selected. Then the police showed me a document recovered during the investigation. A script. The phrases were nearly identical to Claire's messages. I feel safe with you. Age does not matter when souls recognize each other. My bank is temporarily frozen. Please do not tell your family, because they will misunderstand. You are the only person I can trust. I remembered where I had been when each sentence arrived. The kitchen, the garden, Anne's chair. Every word that had made me feel special was sitting on a page, ready to be used on someone else. I covered my face with both hands. I sent you away. I said to Rachel, I chose them over you. She moved her chair closer. I'm sorry. Dad. Look at me. I could barely lift my head. They used your loneliness against you. She said, that doesn't make your love foolish. It makes what they did cruel. For the first time since the police arrived, he let her hold my hand. The officers believed they could prosecute Daniel Price. The people directing him, however, might be abroad and far harder to identify. I looked at the hospital invoice, the stolen photographs, and the printed script. Could any court truly deliver justice for a crime that had taken my dignity as well as my money? The bank managed to recover part of the second transfer before it disappeared through another account. £6,200 came back. The first payment was gone when the bank advisor told me. I thanked her politely, wrote the figure on a pad, and ended the call. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table thinking about the money that had vanished and the messages that had made me send it. The police arrested Daniel Price several weeks later. He was charged with money laundering offenses connected to several romance fraud victims. When Detective Collins told me, I asked the first question that came into my mind. Was he Claire? No. He said, not in the way you mean. Daniel had allowed money to pass through his account in return for commission. He claimed he never wrote the messages and never spoke to the victims. Perhaps that was true. Perhaps it was simply another excuse. Either way, he had helped make the fraud possible. I was asked to provide a formal statement. The practical details were easy enough. Dates, amounts, account numbers. The difficult part was explaining why I had trusted her. I had to read some of the messages aloud. My voice caught when I reached the word times soulmate. For days beforehand, I had imagined people in court smirking when they heard it. No one did. The prosecutor spoke plainly about how organized fraud worked. They depend on silence. She said, victims often feel too ashamed to report what happened. I looked towards the other people waiting to give evidence. A widower from Devon, a retired nurse from Staffordshire, a woman in her 70s who had believed she was helping a man return from overseas. None of them looked foolish. They looked tired. Daniel eventually pleaded guilty. He received a custodial sentence and a financial restriction order. When the sentence was read, I waited for some great sense of satisfaction. It never came. The punishment felt small beside the damage. No number of months in prison could return the nights I had spent waiting for Claire's messages. No court order could erase the fact that strangers had discussed my grief and calculated how much more I might send. Still, my evidence helped the police connect several accounts. 2 more were frozen. Another transfer, this time from a widowed woman in Staffordshire, was stopped before £7,000 left her account. When Detective Collins told me, I thought about the afternoon. I had insisted the bank release my own payment. Perhaps justice was not always about getting back what had been taken. Sometimes it was about stopping the same thing happening to someone else. Rachel asked whether I would speak at a fraud awareness meeting, run by a local charity for older people. Not with my name. I said, you don't have to use it. I don't want pity. That isn't why they've asked. I agreed on the condition that I remained anonymous. On the evening of the meeting, I stood behind a small lectern in the community center while 20 or 30 people sat in rows of plastic chairs. I had prepared notes about suspicious bank accounts, failed video calls, and sudden emergencies. For the first few minutes, I followed them exactly. Then I stopped reading. I did not send money because I was greedy or careless. I said. The room became quiet. I sent it because someone made an empty house feel occupied again. The words were not in my notes. They were simply true. Afterwards, 3 people waited to speak to me. One woman admitted she had been messaging a man she had never met. He needed £7,000 for a visa emergency. I was going to send it tomorrow. She said, please speak to your bank first. She nodded, already crying. That conversation stayed with me far longer than Daniel Price's sentence. Rachel helped me put safeguards on my accounts. Not control. Safeguards. Large transfers would now require a second conversation with the bank. Fraud alerts came directly to me. Rachel would only be involved if I asked her. That mattered. The answer was not for my daughter to take over my life. It was for me to stop facing difficult decisions entirely alone. Slowly, the story ceased to belong to the people who had deceived me. The money was still gone. The humiliation was still real. But it no longer controlled the meaning of what had happened. There was only one thing I had not done. Claire's final voice note remained on my phone. I told myself I kept it as evidence. The police already had a copy, so why? Even after the conviction, could I not bring myself to delete the voice of a woman who had never existed? Several months passed before I deleted Claire's messages. There was no dramatic decision, no final speech, no sudden burst of anger. I sat in the garden one mild afternoon, with my phone in one hand and a mug of tea in the other. The lavender beside the patio had begun to flower. I planted it where one of Anne's old rosebushes had died. For weeks, I had told myself I was keeping Claire's messages because the police might need them. They already had copies. The truth was harder to admit. Part of me was still grieving, not Claire herself. She had never existed. I was grieving the mornings when someone appeared to be thinking of me, the evenings when the bungalow felt less empty, the future I had allowed myself to imagine. I opened the final voice note. Her voice was soft. Please don't give up on us. Peter. For a moment, I closed my eyes. The comfort I had felt was real. That was the difficult part. The person offering it was not. Then, I pressed delete. The screen asked whether I was certain. This time, I was. From inside the bungalow came the sound of Rachel laughing. She had arrived with her husband and the children half an hour earlier. Coats were hanging over the banister. Someone had left shoes in the hallway. The kitchen was full of half-finished conversations. For years, I had treated noise as something that belonged to other people's houses. Now it had returned to mine. Rachel stepped into the garden. Tea's nearly ready. I'm coming. She glanced at the phone. Everything all right? Yes. I put it in my pocket. I think it is. I began attending the history group at the community center more regularly. At first, I sat near the back and left before the tea was poured. Then the organizer asked whether I would help arrange local heritage walks. I knew Worcester well after decades of inspecting buildings. So I agreed. That was where I met Margaret Ellis. She was a retired librarian with silver hair, sensible shoes, and firm opinions about nearly everything. During our first proper conversation, we disagreed about the best pub lunch in Worcester. The Plough does a better steak pie. She said, the portions are too small. That is because you judge meals like council floor plans. I laughed. She did not call me handsome. She did not tell me fate had brought us together. She did not ask whether I owned my bungalow or how much I had saved. The following week, she handed me a cup of tea. No sugar. She said, you remembered. It wasn't difficult. That small kindness stayed with me all afternoon. We began speaking after the walks, then over tea, then sometimes by telephone. Slowly, there were no promises, no emergencies, no pressure to decide what we were becoming. For the first time, I did not need an answer immediately. I had learned that uncertainty was not always a threat. Sometimes it was simply time doing its proper work. Rachel once asked whether I trusted Margaret. I'm learning to, I said. She smiled. That was enough. Trust, I now understood, did not mean ignoring doubt. Real trust allowed questions. Real affection did not ask you to hide it from your family. It did not create emergencies that only money could solve. It did not punish caution or demand proof through sacrifice. What those people stole from me was not simply £12,500. For a while, they stole my confidence in my own heart. They made me believe that wanting love had made me weak. Rachel helped me understand otherwise. Being deceived did not mean I had been wrong to want companionship. It meant I had offered trust to people who had never earned it. One Sunday afternoon, Rachel and I were walking towards the house when the garden gate opened. Margaret stood there holding a small cake box. I was told tea was involved. Rachel looked at me. I looked at Margaret. Then I smiled. Come in. There was no promise of perfect romance. No certainty about what would happen next. Only tea without sugar. A noisy bungalow, and the possibility of something honest. After betrayal. Perhaps, courage is not trusting someone new at once. Perhaps it is having the wisdom to let trust grow slowly enough to become real.